Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to be today, last day of our second course in the beautiful Dubrovnik. And walking yesterday through the streets of Dubrovnik, I learned again and again how important is sustainability, how important is protection of the cultural heritage and our environment. I was very much worried that Dubrovnik could be destroyed during the civil war in Yugoslavia, and I see that all destruction disappeared, all new roofs. And so I'm very pleased to be, because this is not only the place which people from Croatia and the former Yugoslavia keep in heart. This is the great global heritage site, and then we are attached to this. So my last topic is on sustainable societies, on some theoretical and practical aspects. I plan to cover three major areas, and also sharing some... no screen? Okay. First, I will start with defining sustainability, sustainable development, sustainable business, sustainable society, and then present my approach, my take on it's coming. So then I would like to come to very tough issue. How to assess, how to measure, are we making progress? Sustainability. Okay. So at the end, I would like to present results. I will make some brief comments about the methodology of the newly published Social Progress Index. Because I was privileged to be at the pilot stage of this project, working with Professor Michael Porter, and he presented the initial attempts in 2012 and then 2013, and now recently was published a report of 2014. So this is my plan, and I hope we will have also a fruitful discussion as we used to have in the previous days. Sustainability term is very often used, and in different disciplines. Very often it is a substitute of the term sustainable development. One of the toughest problem to resolve theoretically, not only in economics, but in the other disciplines, in particular for economists, is how to secure intergenerational equity, how to secure the interest of future generation. We discussed here, Sasha raised the point about the discount rate, and then we tend to consume now. We are, consumers do not have, it depends on the country by country. There are big differences, cultural differences, significant differences. But in general, there is a tendency to spend now, not save for the future. if I will look for a type of meta definition of sustainability, I would say that sustainability means maintaining a state of dynamic balance of a system with its major elements interacting each other and with its relations with the higher system. And in biological system, sustainability is related to securing necessary diversity and reproductive capacity, so which secure the growth and stability. For the global environment, sustainability means that the Earth's basic ecosystems are dynamically balanced. Imbalances temporarily are normal when structural changes are ongoing, but the dynamic balance, and longer period are critical. For human beings, sustainability means the long-term maintaining the current capacity. It's what I want to emphasize, this fact, because we pay too much attention focusing on the well-being, not what carry out our life, carrying capacity. The carrying capacity of the earth secure our non-declining wealth and reproduction. If we will focus, and I will come back to this topic later, you will see my attempt. But if we will focus only on the wealth, what combines the wealth, we are getting departed from the sources of wealth. So, when we are talking about sustainability for human beings, we need to remember about limits of our natural endowments, natural capital, which is the base for carrying capacity. And then we need to secure the interest of future generation. For economists, the issue of sustainability and sustainable development was a problem at the beginning of emerging environmental economics, and then also raised with the publication of J. Foster, the Global System Dynamics, and then Meadows' report on limits to growth. So, Nobel Prize winner, Solow, published interesting article raising the issue of sustainability and particularly intergenerational. A few years later, small article, I guess there are 5 pages, of John Hartwig, somehow synthesized and made very clear concept of non-declining resource endowment. And then in economics, we use this term, Hartwig rule. It's amazing that this brief article, 5 or 7 pages, is one of the most cited articles in economics. So, we know that the definition of World Commission on Environment and Development, published in the so-called Brundtland Report, Our Common Future, 1987, which defined the sustainable development as development which meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet our own needs. So, again, meeting the needs, the basic needs, satisfying the needs without jeopardizing chances to meet the basic needs, our sons and daughters, granddaughters, and so on. Very often, even in our discussion, we focus on two major actors, and the government and business. But I want you to remember that we have more stakeholders involved in shaping and contributing to sustainable development. There are many levels of governments, but the companies, we didn't spend enough time before, so I will try to extend a little bit this topic, because the major resources are in the companies. In fact, the material wealth is produced in the companies. Period. Households, companies. So this is what we need to look carefully. How do they behaving, and what are the changes? Are there any paradigm shifts going on there? If they are, or should be facilitated, reward those who are moving in the right direction and penalize or shame those which do not follow these patterns. We're talking about NGOs here, and particularly with the networking, and then we as NGO, we know that this is very important. In fact, NGOs are the major contributors to build the social capital. When we speak of social capital, it's mostly built, in terms of the social networks by NGOs, non-governmental organizations. Academia is very critical. We're talking, and particularly Ivo made excellent contributions, and Alberto on the academia, and then media. We didn't talk much about media. I think that we should pay more attention how media presents the important issue. How independent are media, how much they are interested in sustainability issue. In general, from my perspective, living almost last 30 years in the United States, except public TV, I don't see serious media interest in sustainability. Sometimes Discovery Channel, there are some programs, ABC and so on, from time to time. Conservative economists is doing pretty good job in terms of, for instance, popularizing the issue of climate change and the environmental issues. But we need to collaborate with media more effective way. And then from the first presentation I heard here from Janani, to Alberto, we need to empower the citizens with the knowledge and also the skills how they should protect their rights to live in healthy environment, to contribute to sustainability, how to get media involved. So this is something we should not give up, and then we should think about how to reach the citizens. And finally, international institutions. This is a big challenge. We have too much expectations they would need. If you look at the social capital attached to, or the trust to international institutions, is very low in general. So there are, of course, some exceptions. But we pay too much attention that, there is a Earth Summit, they will resolve the issue. Okay, well, we see what are the results. We don't have, I keep my finger crossed for the next year for the final strong accord on climate change in Paris. I wish, but we need to work. And it will not come just from the government. They need to be under pressure. Anyway, so I want to move to the issue of sustainable business. How we can convert the largest resources we have in economics. Because the government have only those they collect from taxes. Governments do not produce the wealth, they distribute the wealth. So this is how to make business sustainable and how to make them responsive to the environmental challenges and to the economic sound. So very often sustainable business is referred as green business or triple bottom line business, which meet the economic, social, and environmental objectives. Here, for instance, the criteria of the green business after Kuhn, who is Australian entrepreneur, very publishing interesting experiences from his business and sharing his business worldwide. So, sustainable business or green business incorporates principles of sustainability into each of the business decisions. Second, it supplies environmental products and services that replace demand for non-green or non-sustainable products. Three, it is greener than traditional competitors. So, if you buy the greener products, you are getting additional value. And this is also value for producer and value for consumer. And then finally, it has made an enduring commitment to environmental principles and its business operations. From economic, this was entrepreneurial perspective, and then he didn't get bankrupt. He is very successful and sharing this experience worldwide, which is really the testimony that, good record, that he is not preaching to the forest, he knows what he is talking. As I mentioned, my first lecture, I cited Porter, Michael Porter several times. I even did mention today. His name came to me. He inspired me when I read his article sometime in the 80s, late 80s, arguing. I guess that time was the Bush administration or whoever was, doesn't matter. But it was scientific, economic policy argument that stronger environmental regulations, stronger enforcement of laws is good for competitiveness because it forces higher efficiency, lowers liability. We have lawyers here, you understand what I am talking, and this is the lower the cost in short and longer term. It was very important, but unfortunately not the mainstream argument. But since that time I started reading, and then I was fortunate to work with him. And then 2006 he presented interesting, with Kramer, interesting concept, when CSR appeared because of the critics of the business practices and many businesses try to just do CSR as window dressing or just purely PR. And he said, no, CSR should be a part of your strategic concept. And so I would try to show how it is developed. And it's important that such people are teaching this. And then recently he presented the concept of shared values. But anyway, let me show some of his slides, which I am using in my classes. When we think about competitiveness, very often, and too often, building competitive advantage, emphasize lowering the costs. And, Porter and I ask, sometimes I'm talking with the policymakers and politicians, say, we have competitive economy because we have low cost. And say, well, how do you want to improve the wealth of your nations if you will keep the wages low and you are competitive on low wages? This is not the way. And this is developed economy, like Poland, Romania, Ukraine, misdeveloped in some areas. This is not the way to compete. You need to diversify product. You need to present unique product with higher value and charge the prime price, higher price. If you produce green products, you can charge for additional value what you produce for consumers. At the same time, you are reducing the footprint, ecological footprint. So we should promote change about thinking about competitiveness, emphasizing on product differentiation, on producing unique products which are competitive. So we use the concept to be competitive. We use the terms, the diamond of competition. And here are the examples of the diamond of competition which has these sustainable elements. For instance, Marriott job training, they invest in the training, to meet the needs of, Gary was talking about the Marriott company. Microsoft invested a lot. If you go to the University of Washington, in Seattle, you see how much Microsoft and the founding fathers of Microsoft invested in this university. Because they, as teenagers, they get access to this university. They learned a lot. They feel this is time to pay back. And they use the research now, and they contribute to development of knowledge. So anyway, in this diamond of competition, the idea is that on the left side, we have the factor conditions. So this is how we shape the human capital, how we prepare use the natural resources, how we develop new technologies, and how we improve the access to capital. Then we have on the top, we have the box called context of firm strategy and rivalry. It is very important for sustainability to know whether we have the fair or unfair or monopolized competition, whether we have the problems to access the market. Maybe there are some non-fair regulations or barriers. How the intellectual property are protected. Is the transparency in tax collections and tax reporting? Is the fairness? And is the rule of law implemented, Professor Winston. These are the important elements you were talking, to build a sustainable business, to keep the fairness on the market, and to have the merit-based performance evaluation. What was the worst message come out from the financial crisis? That this big chief executive officer from big corporation, they were getting huge bonuses, huge salaries. Even their companies were bankrupting or poorly performing. This is not fair. We cannot build sustainable business this way. We cannot build a sustainable business if they are short located. And then, on the lower side, the local demand. And this is the consumers who should demand. We have the network of the Whole Foods consumers organization. They are demanding quality products. There are co-ops which are focusing on organic food. And then, we are pushing in some places with satisfaction, some not, on environmental labeling, to have the good labeling of what is inside the product, which are the organic product at the fair. So this is, we have now the local, there is the tendency to develop local market, to cut the cost of transportation, and to have the opportunity to be face to face with producers. And this way exercise type of peer pressure on the quality. And finally, we have the related and supported industry, the lower box, to develop the locally grown product like Cisco or Nestle milk collections. There are examples of developing the local product. Access to firms, and also, which is very important, to have effective clusters around, which build this synergy, which produce the efficiency. So this is how we incorporate the sustainability elements into traditional diamond of competition, which is taught in all business schools. And further, we can move to another category, which is really this is also supported theoretical innovation, the value chain. And this is in designing the product. We can eliminate those products which based on animal testing, for instance, or which do not guarantee the product safety when unsafe. We can eliminate the products which do not conserve energy or raw materials. So here also the issue of transparency and the issue of lobbying. These are all elements of the value chain, healthcare and other benefits, job discrimination. All these elements in compensation policy, layoff policy, all these elements are a part of the value chain. And the value chain is critical for enterprise to be in or out of market. So, and then on the operation, this is on the support activities, like, firm infrastructure, human resources, technology, and procurement. Also, the environmental green procurement is also the movement which is interesting. And on the other side, we have the primary activity, transportation. What type of transportation we use? I mentioned yesterday that Boeing made a type of commitment with the Puget Sound Transit introducing flexible time, introducing extra bus, and cutting free parking, incentive to drive. This is big, and then offering public transportation instead, which big impact on the greenhouses footprint. No, significant reduction. So, further in operation, emission waste reduction, biodiversity and ecological impact reduction, energy uses, worker safety, elimination or minimization of hazardous materials. So these are all elements of the value chain. Packaging and transportation impact, outbound marketing activities in terms of truthful advertising. And particularly, avoiding manipulation of most innocent consumers, children. Pricing practices. So avoiding the price discrimination. Providing consumer information. And then finally, after sales, providing disposals of used products. For instance, if I buy HP cartridges, I am getting the envelope, I'm sending them back for processing because the large scale, they process much better. When I use the batteries, I bring to the shop, Home Depot, they collect this and they send. However, we have now in Seattle, the collection of this hazardous stuff like batteries and so on. And so on. So we have a lot of elements we can include to the value chain. And this is what I was mentioned. I have mentioned already, introducing CHR to the strategic concept. But the most important, in terms of creating shared value, we are getting here from his latest article with Porter Kramer article about creating shared value, showing that company productivity depends on many issues dealing with sustainability, from environmental impact through energy use, water use, employee health, worker safety, worker skills, and the supplier access and viability. This is very interesting that there is energy conversion, energy efficiency and conversion to renewable in the Walmart. Huge company worldwide. And then if suppliers do not follow the corporation strategy, they are out of supply chain. So somehow, huge corporations, they have a big impact on the whole supply chain. Do we use this? Enough. Very often, non-governmental organizations are reluctant to do type of negotiations with corporations because they want to stay clean, they want to stay out of influence. Well, you need to be a mature organization to have the equal footing negotiations. But this is necessary because these are the major resources. And you can offer them your expertise, how to build shared values. Anyway, so there are hundreds of definitions of sustainable society. I pick up one of them. Society that ensures the health and vitality of human life and culture and its natural capital for the present and future generation. What does it mean? It means that the society which stops the activity which are distracting to the environment, the society which conserves the resources, society which restore the damage to an environment and to prevent continuing damage. These are the great definitions. But how to measure, how to operationalize? This is the part I would like to focus now. In economics, we have two approaches to operationalize the notion of sustainability. One focusing on maximizing the wealth, and the second on the capital maintenance, or capital maintenance approach on non-declining capital. In fact, we're talking with Ian Johnson yesterday about late Professor David Pearce, and he was particularly interested in popularizing the term of non-declining total capital, which is linked to sustainable carrying capacity. When we're talking about sustainability in economics, we have three categories of sustainability. Strong sustainability means that none of these three or four forms of capital could be substituted. Weak, there are no limits on substitution. So you can substitute natural capital with man-made, completely Ivo presented the other day, that type of potential. Or, we can replace human capital by machines, Yeah. Of course, you cannot fully replace, because it will be always the intellectual capital over there. But anyway, and then Tittenberg proposed the environmental sustainability, which is the weak sustainability. It depends what you prefer to take, with limits with certain threshold of substitutions. Or you can say, well, this is the strong sustainability weakened by some threshold. You can, to a certain point, you can substitute, that poor percentage. But anyway, so we know that we cannot substitute natural capital in national parks, but, renewable forests, why not? And then if we have the sustainable harvest of fish stock, if we are not depleting, sure, why not? We need to do this, but we need to keep these thresholds which will destroy the sustainability. And so what is the Hartwig rule? Hartwig rule means simply that we can secure our consumption or our well-being, our wealth, if we will be able to maintain perpetually, if all scarcity, the capital, only when all scarcity ends, we will invest in capital. So somehow, because the capital is always scarce, because we have more needs than available capital, and there are different rents for natural, minerals, renewable, and so on. If we will reinvest these rents into capital, create from these rents new capital, we will keep non-declining capital. This is the whole idea. And then these are some formula. In terms of the non-declining wealth, we use usually the GDP per capita, which we criticize significantly, and there is a fair criticism. But this is the most popular. David Pearce introduced a type of improvement, small improvement, to the GDP GDP-based indicators, he introduced non-declining genuine savings. Now, more common name is adjusted net savings. He introduced this in 94, and then in fact, he used to work with Ian. He financed this work because the World Bank is the big think tank, not only lending institution. This is the world's largest economic think tank. And they made this pilot implementation of this indicator in Indonesia and in some other countries. And this is the whole and then since 99, the World Bank introduced this net adjusted savings to the statistical yearbook. So what is inside? So you reduce GDP by annual consumption, by capital depreciation, and you add expenditures on education, expenditures on building human capital. This is what David tried to do. I still have his slides, from this presentation. He wanted to show the 3 different types of capital and then how we can invest, So he showed the human capital expressed by spending on education. And the natural capital, the next 4 elements, energy depreciation, energy resource depreciation, mineral resource depreciations, forest depletion, and the damage caused by climate change. So this is the formula. This is the idea of the formula, and this is the practical implemented formula by the World Bank. So the important elements, because you will hear my concept within few seconds. I want to use similar approach as he did and the World Bank did. For net adjusted savings, to pick up the expenditures for education as investment in human capital, and also to use the indicators of depletion of natural capital, or increase, because we might have positive growth of reforestation, for instance, could be higher than deforestation. So we made few years ago assessment how these sustainability indicators work for the countries in transition. We compare with European Union. To our surprise, we found out, as you see the 2 top lines, European Union 15, the old European Union, and those early liberalizers, the 6 countries which joined, of 10. So they had similar net savings, around 10%. They were not that stable, The next group, the late liberalizers, also, increased to the level like, 3-4%. So, they're catching up. The worst thing is for those who are not reformers. Anyway, so we did GDP, but I need to look at my time, and we need to have, for social indicators, we use the life expectancy and the social impact and infant mortality. It is also interesting that in terms of infant mortality, those early liberalizers reached the European Union standard. And also this is the political freedom important. So this is the indicator which I proposed with my friend from University of Minnesota, Richard Bowen, 2005, based on initial concept of Solow, Hartwig, and Peirce. We added simply social capital. And we focus, the idea is, that this total man-made, natural, human, and the social capital should be constant. So this is the base for the carrying capacity. How to measure? I was telling how to measure the social capital. And then today I showed you how World Bank is measuring changes in the natural capital and human capital. So we have tools. And we don't have problems to measure the other man-made capital because they are already established. So these are the general ideas, and this is what I hope that by the end of this year I would be able to present the results for these two regions I am working, for the state of Washington and Podkarpackie voivodeship in Poland. So we need to work further on operationalization, but in general, I want to follow the pace that David Pierce did and the World Bank. Anyway, now the social progress, the new idea based on the idea introduced by Amartya Sen and Douglas North and Joseph Stiglitz, who opposed, criticized the GDP indicator. So they introduced three groups of social progress indicators. There are altogether, I believe, 87 indicators. Basic human needs, foundations of well-being, and opportunity. So in the basic human needs, there are such groups like nutrition and basic medical care, water and sanitation, access to water and sanitation, shelters, housing, and personal safety. So this is the basic stuff from the Maslow pyramid of the needs. In the foundation for well-being, we have the basic access to knowledge, access to information and communication, health and wellness, and ecosystem stability. For the opportunities, personal rights, personal freedom and choice, tolerance and inclusion, and access to advanced education. And now these indicators, there was a very interesting consortium led by MIT with Harvard, the major competitor, and with Columbia University, the economists, and there is the Oxford University. So anyway, the very prominent academic institutions, and then the steering committee was led by Michael Porter, who made the introduction to the United Nations Ministerial Conference last July, and now they produce. This is the map of this indicator. So the highest, around 60 plus points with the blue colors. Then we say what would be the type of, what would be the color of the light blue, okay. Then, the yellow, orange, and the poorest are the marked with the black color. And here's the list, the country. This is from the original site, and then since we don't have the ranking, this is the first 20. New Zealand is leading with 88% of the social progress, 91, almost 2 basic human needs, and 85 and the foundation of well-being, and 88 the opportunities. I decided that the resolution was better from Wikipedia, and so I used this stuff. This is the rank number. This is the first 19 countries, and this is the next 20, so to 40. So, I mean, again, United States was listed at 16 here, which is maybe surprise for some. I mean, they're led by New Zealand, Switzerland, Iceland, Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, Canada, Finland, and Denmark, and Australia. So Scandinavian countries are the lead. All of them are in the first 10. So then 11 and Austria in Germany.
Inequality?
This is exactly, yeah, it's also take the inequality in the income distribution. So this is why United States. And then you can see, the other tables. So the Spain, Portugal, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Costa Rica, Uruguay, Poland, this is the, South Korea, Italy, Chile, and then Israel, and then 39, and then we have 41 Serbia, Argentina, Bulgaria, and I missed, from 80, and the Russia was in that group 60, from 61 to 80. And then it is very interesting that China was also listed here, 90 position. This is very interesting, and this is the poorest over 100. Nepal to Madagascar and Mauritania, Togo. So it's interesting proposition, and because it was recently published, so I hope that will be interesting discussion. Okay, we have 15 minutes for the discussion. Okay, thank you for your attention.
Just to support the need to shift from linear economic activity to something different. There is, I think, well-known concept of circular economy also. Because in linear model of economic activity, we have something like produce, consume, and dispose. Produce, and dispose. Between every those segments, there is a critical point. Between production and consumption, it's very critical, is design. How we are getting the product and how we are using it. Between consumption and disposal, it's very critical how we consume some goods and services and so on. And what we are producing through that process. And the very critical point is at the end of the linear chain is 4R concept. Rethink, reuse, let me check. Repair and recycle. Recycle. 4R. So, in order to rethink the linear model, I think we need to move from linear to circular kind of economic activity. It's very close to the zero-based concept. So it's very close to some biological models with biomimicry, the idea behind that, and so on. So I think it's very worth to mention circular economy and other models which are already introduced. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, the only ones who need the concept of sustainability is the human species. Nature doesn't need it. You have periods of time that a third of the species was wiped out, didn't really make any big difference. Still gets going a rate of a couple of billion years, and if humans would disappear, that probably would be the best for the rest of nature. So the second one that I would like to say is, you can look at sustainability from a corporate point of view, and then you can see, there are many different ways how you can sort of make your products more environmentally friendly, how you can save energy and everything. But then there's a kind of a ceiling where you reach the real bottom line of the company. And the stock listed company, for an example, has one mandate, and that mandate is to produce growth for the shareholders. And unless you change that and you sort of enable the company to put the societal value above the producing growth for the shareholder, a stock-listed company will never be sustainable on a global kind of level. Interestingly, when you look I really believe there's something like a human dimension to it. When you look, for an example, at a small SMB, car repair shop on the countryside. Yeah? There are about 6, 7, or 8 people working there. The guy who owns it knows every one of them, everybody's family, so whenever there's something social, there's no problem. Hey, I can't wait today to take care of my children or something like this, or my wife is sick or whatever. So you don't have those problems at all. And they don't even want to grow. Why? It just causes trouble. He needs to take up the credit, he needs to run the risk, he's living perfectly anyway. So I think, there is, as long as you have a certain kind of human dimension, you also don't really have the need to grow. It's not sort of an elemental part of industry. I think it becomes an integral part of industry once you cross a certain kind of a human dimension, especially if it becomes anonymous, like stockers. Even a company that's in the hand of a family still, that goes in principle up to Bochniarz, which is still 40-50% owned by the family. They are still capable, for an example, of allowing the company to do things that minimize the profit, but they maximize a certain benefit to society, because usually they also are still linked to the people that they originated from. So that's what I think, like sustainability in a company, as long as you don't get rid of this mandate to sort of produce growth for the shareholder, and interest in the actual short-term growth. Because if you go to the shareholder, you say, listen, I want to invest in something which will make the company flourish for the next 50 years, and say, come on, get lost. I want my money in the next year. Quick.
Okay. Just a brief response. It's very interesting. If you look, there is probably it's about 15 years old, the Dow Jones Sustainable Index. If you look, this is very interesting phenomenon. It came from business community, and then you need to have the sustainable performance, and then your competitors are watching whether this is fair or not. There is a peer pressure. There are also NGOs on the board. Another interesting, pressure on companies is the disclosure. If you look at the current list, 480, as far as I remember the last number, of Fortune 500 disclose their carbon footprint. It's a big achievement. There's a pressure. There is a pressure on them.
Yeah, the question is just how does it go? I think one good example is Nestle. Nestle had this campaign in the 70s, Nestle Kids Babies, but they were sort of selling this powdered milk. And, the people in Africa, didn't understand that you need a certain kind of amount of powdered milk. You can't just water it down. They thought they were thinking more of the magic that's contained in it. And then afterwards, Nestle decided for itself, and it was actually the head of Nestle who told me this, they decided that despite this campaign, their sales were increasing. They said, we don't need all that. That's why they never invested into NGOs or anything like that. They just did their business, period. So it really depends, how far you let this influence your corporate policies.
I listed Nestle not because of the company. I didn't want to rank companies. It was not intentional. I listed the good practices of some companies. It was the good practice to develop the local market. This is only for this case, So this is. My topic was not about that, but my major idea is that we pay too much attention on the demand side to show wealth, and then we are struggling. What does it mean, the wealth for African person comparing with Europeans or Asian? So, different structure, consumption structure and so on. We are facing cultural differences, value interests, and so on. If we move to the supply side, so to the capital, to the carrying capacity, it's universal for everybody. Whether you work in Africa, you need capital. You work in the United States or Europe, you need to have capital. In Asia. So this is why, I want to move us out of the fight of the values, and then looking, do we find any basket which of the wealth which will satisfy all this? It's hopeless. Let's focus on the capacity, on the carrying capacity. This is what I call, after Peirce, non-declining capital. And focus on this, to keep these elements, non-declining. They could grow, sure, because in some areas they could be stable, in some other there might be some qualitative changes in the capital, but it put us in neutral way, because everybody needs capital to produce anything. So this was my major idea.
Can I just take you up in a slightly different direction?
Okay.
It's not from the economist point, but from a lawyer's point. And there have been some things that lawyers have noticed, in particular, from the 30s to the present time, at least in the context of corporate development in the US, there's a discernible trend away from the notion of ownership, influence, control, to executive authority, divorced from ownership. So that even though there's some residual interest and influence of the shareholders, that is in a radically diminished fact. And that corporate control now is much more executive authority divorced from the shareholders' interests. And that's been a big problem because shareholders can't even begin to test what the corporation is actually doing, what the aspect or scope of corporate responsibility is, etc. And that has not been addressed. In fact, people don't want to address it. When it comes up, there's an enormous lobby there which lobbies against any legislative reform of the structure of corporate governance. That's just one fact. Now, the second fact here is this. The entire system is fundamentally based on an anthropological notion of exchange. Okay? You can't do anything you can't exchange. Take that and put it into a juridical form, and that becomes the concept of contract. Now we look at the crisis of the concept of contract. What's that crisis? What the crisis is that corporations now write contracts in such a way that they can basically redefine risk in one direction almost exclusively. The entire crisis of the mortgage is essentially a paradigm of that. Now when we try to test that, almost every state's attorney has recognized, the goddamn thing was based on fraud. We're willing to pay $5-6 billion or whatever, but we don't want a finding of what they actually did. That's exactly what it is. That's correct. So what we've got here is the illusion of the freedom of contract. The entire system is now based on an illusion. And so unless you are willing to grapple in a much more fundamental way at that dimension, then of course the consumer is invariably at risk, because I just bought a property about a month ago, and there are 15 pages of single-space things. And I had 15 minutes to go through it. I'm a local person. There's no way how I can go through it. I said, no, I'm coming back tomorrow, but I'm going to take this with me. Sure. Where is what we do? And to take it over, you don't sign this. Or you respond back. Yeah. There's no way you So what I'm trying to say is, and then of course we have this, the credit card scam. I mean, the way in which that is set up, efforts to the companies have spent, I think, about $50 billion to prevent any effort to even look at the problem. So what we have then is the whole foundation of the system is now gravitating to the illusion of the freedom of contract. Not the reality, but the freedom. And the whole system is based on the idea that, the consumer can make some kind of a rational choice. That is rapidly becoming an illusion. And if the system is based on evolution, we have an even deeper crisis. And when Ian talks about, let's go back to the fundamentals of supply and demand, well, at the back of supply and demand, what's the notion that you get some choice here? But extinction of choice is a complete
monopolization. This is the monopolization. Economists say the monopolization. Okay, sorry. I would like to quickly respond and then go to catch up my plane. Well, few things. You are right, but it's somehow behind. But this is the issue of the financial and corporate institutions, how they were. It was postulated, and then I think that this group which was analyzing the roots of the crisis, financial crisis, suggested, first of all, to avoid sharing chief executive officer and president of the board of directors, to separate the board of directors from the executive branch, and then, empower the really stakeholders. This will be very important, because now I agree with you that the chief executive officer, if they are having the double functions, they are really out of control of stakeholders. And the stakeholders are very important, as I mentioned. Many non-governmental organizations are buying the shares, stock, and they are trying to influence the board if they will be excluded, by this. So this is one. And the second, what is also and then I share with Mike Porter. He is critical about the development of corporate sector in the United States based on the strategy of consolidation to get bigger and bigger instead of developing new products, being, the size, utilizing better the capital. Because, this is what you are getting on the larger power of the market. And then you have this crazy laid-offs and all the things that are getting bonuses and so on. We have serious problems with the corporate system, not only in the United States, but probably worldwide, and then it should be addressed. So, but this is something what lawyers should work with economists and with politicians, and it's very difficult to move, but because of the lobbying, but I completely agree with you, and it could address this issue. But anyway, this practice is what I have mentioned. They are, helping us to move at certain direction. So I would like to
just wait 1 minute.
Okay, good. 1 minute. Okay.
Close this session. I'd like to thank you for a very interesting presentation.
I wanted to say.
Before you close the session,
but I have to run.
He has to run, and I want to make a comment.
Go.
I was thinking about the issue. In accordance with Einstein's formula, the old-fashioned type of economy is like economy equals money, time, consumption squared. So in order to formulate something like a new economic theory or something like that, we need to change the C. So economy equals money times change or capacity or creativity squared. So it's a tricky issue in order to focus our discussion. And then very interesting is what Winston said. You probably remember what Milton Friedman said, like business of business is business. Mm-hmm. It's typical neoliberal thinking, yes. But I'm sure you notice the change, the shift from that kind of thinking. Not because I belong to different ideological group of people, whatever. But the responsibility of business now is to not only to shareholders, but to stakeholders. Yes. Broader set of entities, subjects, like global community, like Greece, like state, like general public events. So it's according to that change. And we need to know. Sorry.
But I just want to add on to that, the corporates still find loopholes into that because they go into the shareholders who have stakes and they buy them out. And there's a lot of corruption there as well. So it's like, we had legislation that protects shareholders, and some of our corporates with their capital, huge capital, go to court and one after the other, and you can't advocate them.
And also we developed corporate social responsibility concept, but we don't have yet corporate nature respectability concept, I would say.
By the way, this is exactly the kind of discussion I was hoping we'd have yesterday afternoon, because this shows that outside of conventional economics, how many legal concepts are really influencing the way the economic system works. It's exactly. So this is not a point to apologize for. This is a point to elaborate on and develop, because it's a core of a new economic theory to understand variables like this. So something very important has surfaced from this. Just while Zbig is packing up, I just wanted one general comment. I very much enjoyed this, and we need to learn more as you need to share your progress on this important work. But a general comment. It struck me as I was listening to Zbig and he was presenting Porter's model and all. There's something about management, I wouldn't call it a science really, but if you notice, I think of all the science, of all the fields of social something, management is the most integrated. It takes into account, it has to manage the individual, it knows the importance of the leader, for sure. It knows, it has to relate to the society for its existence, and it has to understand the power of the organization. And of course its relationships in all directions, whether it's with shareholders or investors, or suppliers or customers or distribution chains or whatever it is. It has to take into account not just the objective factors, but the subjective factors. Because it knows if it can't motivate itself, its people, if it can't motivate the customer, there's no, it's not a mechanism that it's working on. So I think there's a lot we can learn from the comprehensiveness that comes in management. It has to relate to the political environment, to the legal environment, to the financial and technological. It really is a more living discipline that can't exist in abstraction. Of course, it can exist that way in the business school, but it can't exist that way in practice. So I think this is, we have a lot we can learn from this as we go forward towards because management is itself a transdisciplinary science. If you don't just talk about management of a business, but the principles of management, whatever it is, are really essentially transdisciplinary. So, Zbig, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Gary, for